Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Love, Lies, and Betrayal. Let's move to the video. I'm Jack, 30 years old, and to be honest, I've always had a pretty simple life. I work as an IT consultant at a small company, and most of my days consist of sitting in front of a screen, solving problems, and drinking way too much coffee. The job isn't exciting, but it pays the bills. I don't mind though. It keeps me calm. I don't need too much excitement, just a bit of peace and quiet. But like anyone, I'm always looking for something to break the monotony. My neighbors, Rick and Melia, have lived next door for a few years now. Rick is a bit older than me, 55 years old, while Melia is 44. I always thought they made a great couple, but over time I started to notice that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Rick often traveled for work, leaving Maya home alone. At first I didn't think much of it. Everyone has their own routines, but recently I started noticing something different. Maya is incredible. She has an elegant aura about her. She's the kind of woman who can be graceful one minute and care for the next. She's intelligent, always reading something, thought-provoking, and I often see her walking her dog or sitting on the porch sipping wine. There's something captivating about her. She has a presence that makes you want to talk to her, to understand her. I never expected that our next conversation would change everything. It started one afternoon when Rick was away on a business trip. I had just finished work and was about to end my day when I saw Maya sitting on her porch. She looked a bit distant. I hadn't really talked to her much beyond the occasional greeting or small talk in passing, but today felt different. She seemed lonely. "Hey, Maya," I called out as I walked toward her. She looked up, a small smile on her lips. "Oh, hi, Jack. How's it going? All right, just wrapping up some work." I replied casually. "Mind if I sit for a bit, of course," she said, patting the cushion on the seat next to her. At first we talked about the usual things, the weather, work, neighborhood gossip, but the conversation quickly shifted. She mentioned how Rick had been gone for days, and how she felt a little lost without him, you know. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just here," she said, her eyes drifting toward the horizon, "like my life is stuck in a loop. Everything is the same day in and day out." At first I didn't know how to respond. I had always thought Rick was a good guy, but I also knew that Maya wasn't the kind of woman who could settle for mediocrity. She needed more than routine and security. She needed something to reignite her life. And unfortunately, it seemed that spark wasn't coming from Rick. "Do you ever feel like that?" she asked, looking at me now. Her eyes locked onto mine, like you're just going through the motions, doing what you have to do, but not really living. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. To be honest, yeah, sometimes my life is pretty simple. Work, home, repeat. It's not bad. But I can't deny that there are times I wish for something more, something different. I understand, I said almost reflexively. "I think everyone feels that way at some point." She smiled, a sad, but knowing smile maybe. "But for me, it's different. Rick and I have drifted apart. I don't know how to explain it. He's not the man I married. He's not the man I want anymore." I was taken aback by her honesty. I never expected a confession like this, especially from a married woman, but there she was, MIA, openly unhappy. She was searching for something she didn't have, and maybe I was just the man who happened to be there when she needed someone to talk to. I wanted to say something comforting, something reassuring, but I couldn't help but wonder where this was going. Was she implying something? I could feel the tension building between us, and for a moment I wondered if I was overthinking everything. She was attractive, sure, but she was also married. And I respected that. As I sat there, something inside me told me that this wouldn't be the last time Maya and I had a conversation like this. A few days after our conversation, I was back to my usual routine: work, gym, home. Nothing extraordinary, nothing exciting. Then I got a message from Maya. "Hey, Jack, I was thinking about making some coffee later. Want to come over and join me?" I'd really enjoy the company at first. I didn't think much of it. It seemed innocent enough, a casual invitation, right? I mean, she was just being friendly. She was my neighbor, and we had talked a bit, so why not? I texted back, "Sure, sounds great. What time? Around 6 p.m. Hope to see you." Then it wasn't until later that I realized, since we lived only 2 or 3 houses apart, it would be easy for me to drop by. No need to drive, just a quick walk down the street. I couldn't help but wonder why she had specifically invited me. Was this just a friendly gesture? I pushed those thoughts aside that evening. I walked down the street to her house, arriving right on time. She opened the door with a warm smile, looking as effortlessly beautiful as always. Her presence, even just at the doorway, made me pause for a second. There was something about her like a magnetism. I couldn't quite explain. "Hey, Jack, come in," she said, stepping aside. "I just brewed a fresh pot of coffee." "Hope that's okay?" "Yeah, sounds great," I said, trying to keep things casual. As I stepped inside, I was impressed by her home. It was cozy and inviting, with warm lighting and a perfect balance of modern style and personal charm. She led me to the living room where she had already set out the cups and coffee. We sat down and she handed me a cup, her eyes lingering on me for just a second too long. I couldn't help but notice how close we were sitting on the same couch. The room felt smaller, but in a good way, like it was meant for moments like this. "How's everything?" she asked, looking at me over the rim of her coffee cup. "Same as always, really. Work, gym, home. Nothing exciting," I said, trying to keep things light. She nodded, but her expression shifted slightly, as if she were considering something. "Yeah, I get that. Life can get a little boring, can't it?" I chuckled nervously. "Yeah, you could say that." There was a pause, just long enough to be noticeable, before she spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I think there's more to life than just the same routines every day." She set her eyes, never leaving mine. It was hard to tell if she was just making small talk or saying something more. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just shrugged slightly. "I guess so. But coffee is a good way to break the routine." She smiled, but it wasn't just a regular smile. It felt heavier, like she was saying more than her words suggested. Then she set her cup down on the table and leaned in slightly. "You know, Rick and we've been struggling for a while now. HEK always distant, and when he's around it feels like we just don't connect anymore." She admitted, her voice quieter now. I didn't know how to react. A part of me felt bad for her, but another part of me was confused. Why was she telling me all this? Was this just conversation? Or was it something else? I wasn't sure where this was headed, but one thing was clear: something had changed, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. I'm not sure why, but I feel drawn to it. Maybe I'm just curious to see what happens, or maybe it's the feeling that something is beginning to form between us. When I arrived at her house that evening, the door was open. Maya greeted me with that warm smile, but this time there was something different in her eyes. Something I couldn't quite describe. She had changed out of her usual casual clothes into something a little more formal, not overly flashy, but just enough to make me feel like she was making an effort. "Good evening, Jack. Come in," she said, stepping aside. "Dinner is almost ready. I hope you're hungry." I followed her inside. The familiar scent of home-cooked food filled the air. It was comforting. The house felt cozier than ever, as if it was just the two of us in this little bubble separated from the rest of the world. "So what's for dinner?" I asked, trying to keep things light as I hung my coat on the rack. "Just a simple pasta dish. I know it's nothing special, but I hope you'll like it." I smiled. "I'm sure it'll be great." She led me to the dining table where she had already set the plates, silverware, and wine glasses. The setup was simple, but it was clear she had put a lot of thought into it. I sat down, trying not to overthink the situation, but then the wine, red wine, of course. She said, holding up the bottle, "Sure, why not?" I replied as she poured the wine. I could feel her eyes on me. They never lingered away from mine for too long. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it made me self-conscious in a way I wasn't used to. "So, how's work?" she asked, breaking the silence. "You've been pretty quiet lately." I tried to relax, the usual. I go home, work out, nothing exciting. Maya took a sip of her wine, her gaze locked onto mine. "That's the problem, don't you think?" she said softly. "Life should be more than just routine." My heart skipped a beat. Was she implying something? Was this her way of saying she wanted more? "Yeah, I guess," I said, unsure of what I was really agreeing to, "but sometimes it's hard to break out of it, you know?" She nodded slowly, running her fingers along the rim of her glass. "I know exactly what you mean," she murmured. "Sometimes you just need a little spark to make you feel alive again." I couldn't deny the weight of her words in the air between us, and I couldn't ignore the subtle hint of something deeper in her voice. She wasn't just talking about life in general, she was talking about us. The conversation drifted to other topics, but there was an underlying tension I couldn't shake every time I looked at her. There was an unspoken understanding between us, like she was waiting for me to do something, to say something, but I couldn't bring myself to act on it. I wasn't sure what she expected from me, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for anything at all. After dinner, we moved to the living room. She sat on the couch and patted the space beside her, inviting me to sit. I hesitated for a moment before joining her. We talked a little more, but now it felt more intimate, more private. She opened up in a way I didn't expect. She whispered, "I don't have many people I can really talk to about everything. Sometimes I feel like I'm just going through the motions. And when I'm alone, it's hard. I don't know what to do with all these feelings." I felt sympathy for her, but I also felt conflicted. Was this just a lonely woman reaching out? Or was there something more here? She leaned in slightly, her eyes softening. "Jack, I'm glad you're here tonight. You're easy to talk to." I swallowed, unsure of how to respond. "I'm glad I could be here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady once again. There was intent in the air, unspoken but undeniable. I wasn't sure if she was trying to tell me she wanted more, but I couldn't deny that I felt something too. But it wasn't right. As I sat there, I realized I had to make a decision. Did I want to cross that line with her, or would I walk away before things got too complicated? I sat there trying to process everything she had said. The air between us shifted again this time. It felt heavier the way she leaned in, the way her words lingered. It was unmistakable. I had to face it. I had to know what was really happening here. I took a deep breath. "Maya." I started slowly, my voice steady but uncertain. "What exactly do you want from me? Because I'm starting to feel like this isn't just about dinner or coffee or small talk." She stiffened slightly, her eyes widening for a moment, but then she relaxed, taking a long sip of wine before setting her glass down on the coffee table. A silence stretched between us too long. She wasn't surprised she had been waiting for this moment. "You're right," she finally said, her voice smaller, now more vulnerable. "It's not just about coffee, Jack. You can feel it too." My heartbeat quickened. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but hearing her say it out loud felt like a punch to the gut. She wasn't being subtle anymore. She shifted on the couch, facing me fully, now her gaze intense. "I've been thinking about you more than I should," she admitted. "But when I'm with you, I feel different. Like you understand me in a way that I don't feel understood anywhere else." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. She was being more direct than I had ever imagined, but I needed to know. I needed her to say it. "And your husband?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where does he fit into all of this?" She let out a bitter laugh, the sound cutting through the air. "Rick and not in the picture anymore." She sighed, looking down at her hands, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "We've been drifting apart for years. It's been a slow burn. He was never the man I thought he was. Not the man I need my stomach." Twisted, this wasn't just about her feeling lonely. This was something deeper, something that had been building for a long time. She looked back at me, her eyes filled with determination. "Now, when Rick gets home, I'm going to ask for a divorce." She said, "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when I'm not even happy, and I'm tired of living like this. Like I'm waiting for something or someone to give me the courage to make that change. And maybe that someone is you." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat tightened. This wasn't the conversation I had expected when I walked over for dinner, and it certainly wasn't where I thought things would be heading. "I need space," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. "I need time to process this." She nodded, pressing her lips together. "I understand. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push you. I needed to say it. I needed you to know how I feel." I stood up, the tension between us was thick in the air. "I think I should go," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I need some space and I need time to think. But Maya, whatever happened, I need you to understand one thing." She looked at me, hopeful, waiting for me to finish. "I can't do this if it's just an escape from your problems." I said, "I want something real, something that isn't built on baggage, so I need to really think about all of this." She nodded. "I understand, Jack. I really do. As I walked to the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something I wasn't ready for, but deep down, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't ready to walk away from her. Not yet. Her calls felt like she was everywhere, and it was driving me crazy. I couldn't run from her forever, but I was absolutely certain I wasn't ready to face her yet. Then I heard that Rick had returned from his business trip. I wasn't sure what that meant, but it hit me harder than I expected. A few days later, I found out that Maya had filed for divorce. I didn't know how to feel about it. A part of me felt relieved for her. She had finally taken action, stepping out of a marriage that clearly wasn't working, but another part of me felt guilty. I hadn't really been helpful. Instead of being there for her, I had shut myself off completely. I didn't see her for a few days after that. I wasn't expecting to, and maybe that was for the best. But then one evening around 9 p.m., my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole, and there she was, Maya. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't avoid her forever. Slowly, I opened the door, trying to act normal, even though I felt anything but, "Hi, Brian," she said softly. Her voice was gentle but steady. There was something in her eyes that made my stomach tighten. She wasn't angry, but there was sadness there, mixed with something else. Maybe disappointment. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside to let her in. She didn't wait for an invitation. She just walked in as if she had every right to. I closed the door behind her, unsure of how to start. "You've really been avoiding me," she said, standing in the middle of my living room. I don't understand what happened. Why the silence? I ran a hand through my hair, unsure how to respond. I had spent so much time avoiding this moment, and now standing in front of her, I wondered how I had let things get this far. I don't know what to say." "Maya," I finally admitted. "I needed time to process. Everything you dropped a bomb on me. It was too much, too fast, and I wasn't sure how to handle it." She nodded, her eyes sad. I could tell she was disappointed, but there was something deeper beneath it. "I get it," she said, her voice softer now. "Now I really do. But you never gave me a chance to explain. I wasn't asking anything from you, Brian. I just wanted you to understand." I stood there in silence for a moment before finally speaking. "I understand that you're going through a divorce, that you want something different, something more. I understand that, I really do. But I can't. You think I was using you, don't you?" She cut in, her voice a little sharper now. "You think this is just about me needing someone to fill the space Rick left behind?" I shook my head. "It's not that," I said quickly, "but you have to admit, this is complicated. You were married, you're going through a huge change, and I don't want to just be a replacement." She looked at me, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not asking you to be my replacement, Brian," she said, her voice gentle again. "I never wanted that, but I needed change, and I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone who would listen, someone who would understand what I was going through. I understand," I said, my voice a little calmer now. "But this isn't easy, Maya. I don't want to get caught up in something that will hurt both of us in the end." She crossed her arms, clearly hurt. "So what? Now," she asked, "you just walk away? You ignore me for weeks, and then when I finally take a step towards what I want, you slam the door shut?" I looked at her, my heart aching. This was the conversation I had been dreading. But now that it was happening, I had no choice but to face it. "I didn't mean to shut you out," I said quietly, "but I had to. I needed to protect myself too." She shook her head, almost laughing bitterly. "And now, what do you want from me, Brian?" she asked. "After everything, are you just going to pretend nothing ever happened?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. But deep down, I knew one thing. This was a turning point. It wasn't about avoiding her anymore. It was about deciding what I wanted and what I wasn't willing to risk. "I don't know," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I need more time to think. I can't just jump into this. It's not that simple." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the frustration and sadness in her eyes. Then she sighed and turned away. "I get it," she said quietly, her back to me. "I just wanted to talk. I wanted you to understand why I did what I did." And with that, she walked out of my apartment, leaving me standing there unsure of what would happen next. That was the breaking point, when I saw her again. Maya came to my place that night. She had been calling me for weeks, texting me, and each time I ignored her, the frustration built on both sides. But this time there was something different in the air, something unspoken. She was done waiting for me to decide. She was done with the mixed signals I had been sending. She opened the door without waiting for an invitation, her expression serious. Arms crossed over her chest. I could tell she was angry, and honestly, I wasn't sure how this conversation would go. "You know what, Brian?" She started, her voice sharp. "I'm so done with this. I'm done with your games. You're so indecisive. And you know what? It's exhausting. I thought you were different, but you're just like every other guy." I stood there in silence. I knew she had every right to be upset. I had hesitated. I hadn't been clear about where I stood. I had tried to give her space, but I hadn't been honest with myself. And now here we were at the breaking point. I took a deep breath. "My Mia, I never wanted to hurt you," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. I was just confused, and honestly, I didn't know what I wanted. You been through so much, and I didn't want to make things worse for you, but I thought about it, and I can't keep pretending this is something it's not. She stared at me, clearly frustrated. "So what, after everything, you just decide it's too complicated and walk away?" I felt the weight of her words, and they hit me hard. "I can't change how I feel," I said, taking a deep breath. "It's not that simple." She took a step back, her fists clenched at her sides. "You think I need a savior," she snapped. "You think I need you to tell me what's right for me?" I struggled with my marriage for years, and now that I finally had the courage to do something about it, you couldn't even be there for me when I needed someone. I didn't deny my feelings for her, that was impossible, but I had to be honest with myself and with her. This wasn't the right time for either of us, so I made my choice. "It's not right," I said firmly. "I can't be the person you turn to for this. I care about you, but I can't be part of this." Her expression shifted for a moment. She just stared at me. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. The anger faded from her face, replaced by something I couldn't name: sadness, resignation. And maybe a part of her understood, even if she didn't agree. And with that, she walked away. And I stood there feeling both relieved and guilty. I had made my choice. It wasn't easy. It wasn't painless, but it was the right thing to do. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Don't forget to click the notification bell icon to stay notified.